if I had had a band of brothers, if I had had a group of men around me, I can almost promise you there's no way I would have gotten that far off track. But I fell into this space, and I guess a lot of men could resonate with this too. Fell into the space of I'm putting everything into business and my family, and I let everything else slide. Right, and so I quit investing into friendships. And that's something that I've been restoring and getting back, because I just recognize how critical that is. But man, if I had had a group of men, even 2 or 3 men, that I could have felt comfortable sharing where I was at the time, there is no way that I would have fallen so far. And I think that's one of the really dangerous things that men find themselves facing these days, is just the isolation and separating from other men. And then you get stuck in your head and you don't have another man to pull you out of it. And coaches are great, but we shouldn't all have to go hire a bunch of people and do the amount of work I had to do to get out of how far down I dug myself.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers podcast. Our guest tonight is Franklin Swann. He is host of the World Needs Men podcast. Franklin, I'm pumped to have you on, man. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, George. I appreciate y'all having me on tonight.
Yeah, man. It's an honor to return the favor. You had me on your show. I'm really excited to see that one drop. And here we are. We're going to get your story now. So, Franklin, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us about your family, how many kids you got running around and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll go into your story.
Okay, of course. So 42 years old. My wife, Brooke, and I have been married now 18 years. Just had an anniversary a couple weeks ago. And we've got 2 kiddos. Our son is going to be 12 this summer. Our daughter's turning 10 this weekend. And so she's pumped each day. She's like, Dad, it's the last Wednesday that I'll be 9. And then today it's the last Thursday that I'll be 9. And so spend tons of time with them, just real active in their lives. I coach my son's soccer team. I run my own business. And so I try to be really present for them just in all the activities they've got. And my wife and I just we met in New Zealand, studying abroad, which is pretty cool. Didn't script that out, but the way it worked out. And we love to travel, and she's an amazing cook, and just we have a lot of fun together.
That's awesome, man. That's definitely a unique way to meet. So I got to ask, were you there to see the Shire?
It's funny, when I went, there was the planes going into New Zealand and Auckland, or what it would be, New Zealand Air or whatever. They did have all the characters painted on the plane.
Oh, really?
But yeah, but I went in college, and I had just gotten done being the president of my fraternity.
Okay.
And they voted me in as a sophomore, and so that was a bit stressful. And so once I was done, it's like, I want to get out in a way, as far away as possible. So a buddy who was going to University of Georgia told me about this program going down to New Zealand. It's like, well, I get to get way away, and there's really great trout fishing down there. So that's why I went, and then ended up meeting my wife. So, and she was from Atlanta. So thankfully she wasn't from New Zealand.
Nice. ATL. That's where Brandon and I grew up. So yeah, we love that city.
Yeah, awesome. We did long distance dating for a while. Back then there was this airline called AirTran based out of Atlanta, and if you were a student, you could go standby one way for like $75. And so we did lots of $75 5 a.m. standby flights, getting back and forth to see each other. It's pretty cool.
That's fun. That's awesome. All right, well, Franklin, why don't we start with your background a little bit now, and tell us a little bit about what life was growing up, and was your father a strong role model in your life, or did you have some struggles there? Just let us know kind of how things were for you.
Yeah, so I grew up Tyler, Texas. That's where I live now, and I had a great father growing up. I mean, he taught us. He spent a lot of time with us, going outdoors, teaching us how to hunt and fish. I grew up on a little lake, and so spent lots of time running around the woods. And my dad is an extremely generous man, and he's one of those men that can walk into a room and he will make friends with everybody. He just kind of doesn't meet a stranger, and I admire my dad a lot today. He's in his 70s, but he is still pushing. He's on boards. He's just trying to leverage all of his life experience right now to continue to serve. And I think that that's something that I really aspire to when I get older. Is not not that slowing down a little bit's a bad thing, but I just admire him that he hasn't slowed down. If anything, he speeds up. But he loves my mom, loves my brother and I growing up, and he spends a lot of time with his grandkids. And so, I feel very fortunate to have the dad that I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's good to hear the stories of like when it went right,
Yeah.
because we hear a lot of the times when it didn't. And so I'm very, happy for you that you had such a strong role model, and he's still obviously very involved. And, men listening, that's the goal. That's what we want to foster with all of this. Right. So Franklin, I'm glad that you had that. And it's a great example and reminder of how good it can be for us. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. And, there's things he gave me that were great. There's things he didn't give me were great, because it's like, some of us, we just need to learn a few things on our own too. And so there's no, I'm not a perfect dad. None of us are. But he was a fantastic father, still is.
That's awesome. So obviously you met your wife college age, what, in any significant events kind of in between, or you just want to move a little bit forward to, adult life?
Yeah. So I'll just kind of kick into it from there, and really kind of get to the meat of the story that I would want men to hear. So me and my wife, we get married after just not too long after graduating from college. And she goes into staffing. I go into the commercial real estate world. And I don't know if y'all know much about that, but you don't eat much more than you kill. And I found these two brokers who were willing to take me on, show me the ropes. I didn't know anything. And their deal with me was that the first year I'd get an $18,000 draw. And the second year, I pretty much just spent the whole year paying it back. So if you look at the net effect of those first 2 years, it was basically I made $0 net, but I learned a ton. But the where my story goes and kind of takes a turn, man, it is tough when you're a new husband and you're in this spot where your wife is supporting you, and thank God she could. And she's super sharp, wicked smart, and thankfully we were married. I probably would have starved if it wasn't for her, but she supported us. But for me as a new husband, it's like, I want to support my wife. I want her to look at me as this, like, hey, I married the right one, and this man's a great catch. And it was really hard going through that season, not making any money, not feeling like I'm contributing. And that really that ate away at me pretty good. So today I run our family business. I'm fifth generation. We're a 129-year-old company, which is kind of wild. But
That's really cool.
yeah, it's just an old family company. We started in 1895. We're in the furniture and interior design business here in Tyler, and we just have our store here, and just have done what we do for quite a while. And got an amazing team. We got an amazing company. Just a lot of really awesome people who make us look good. Honestly, I feel like, but coming into this business, man. So I go from these 2 years of not making anything to stepping into this business, and it's amazing in a lot of ways. But at the same time, there's no playbook or training for how do you deal with the pressure of being fifth generation. And it's like, no one ever said this to me outright. My dad didn't say this to me, but in my mind, it's like, am I going to be the one who screws it all up? Is it all, am I going to come in, sink the ship, crash the plane? And I just had a super hard time navigating the pressure of running an old family company like this, and just the legacy element to it. And running a business is stressful no matter what. Having a career is stressful no matter what. there's a little bit of a difference when it's an old family business, and just taking that on. And so man, over the course of the next few years, and I got into the company about 2009, early 2009. Um, I just started developing like this anxiety and this overwhelm and pressure. And it's like I would come into the office every day and I was trying as hard as I could, but there was just this piece of me that just felt like I was still falling short, and this piece of me that felt like I still wasn't living up to not my wife's expectations, but my own expectations of who I wanted to be as a husband and father. And slowly but surely, like it just got to this point where I would bring a backpack into the office every day. No one really knew what was in the backpack, but I'd bring it in, and I had 5 undershirts in that backpack. Because as soon as I woke up in the morning, I would start sweating, and it would not stop all day, to the point that I would close the door to my office, and every couple of hours I would switch out my undershirts. I wouldn't wear blue because you'd see these huge sweat stains if I did. I just wore white shirts and shirts that wouldn't show, but the pressure inside was just massive, and I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have someone I could really go talk to, and I didn't feel like I could go to my dad, even though like I could have. It's just something in me was like, I just got to figure this out. And so I started doing stuff like marathons, and started, just trying to basically exercise the stress out. And that worked some, but I would say the mental, emotional side of me, and where I was, just was becoming super unhealthy. Even though I had like an amazing wife at home, and these two, get these 2 amazing children that we get blessed with. And there was just this side of me where felt super inadequate in the store. Um, didn't feel like I knew how to do anything. I mean, we're pretty successful now, so I have figured it out. But at the time, I just was struggling. Um, and I want to share this story because I think it's important for men to know that, like, if you're struggling, man, you're not alone. I think it's really hard when men are in this space, and it's like no one's dealing with what I'm dealing with, or I can't go and talk about this to anybody. And when you feel alone, you just kind of die inside, and you just shove everything down. Maybe you sedate it away, and numb it out with something. My internal rules said, I can't take this out on my family. That's not the man I am. I also refused to crawl inside of a bottle over this. And so, it began to manifest itself in some very maladaptive ways. And in this one night, I just went out in my garage. No one knew about this. I just slipped out in my garage, in this space where I had felt like I had no answers. I was so angry at myself. Really had become filled with this level of self-hate. And I just stepped in the garage and just started wailing on myself. I mean, just balled up my fist, and with no other answers, just started knocking the tar out of myself. And that's the best answer I had. Like, I had all this frustration. I couldn't take it out on somebody else. I didn't have any answers. I wasn't going to just go drink or do drugs. Like, but I still had all this stuff, right? And I couldn't do enough workouts. I couldn't run far enough. And this went on for a while. And finally this one night I'm out there, and I hear this voice, and it was like, I know it was just in my heart and my mind, but I hear this voice, and in my mind, it was there, like, absolutely, it was God speaking in my life. And he just said, "What's next?" Like, just audibly, just sitting there in my garage in this darkness, just lost, confused, frustrated. And the voice just said, "What's next?" And I knew right there that I was at this crossroads. Like, I was either going to continue to go down this path, and very obvious logically where this is going to go. Like, you can't just self-destruct at this level, and for forever without it getting to a final spot. And I just knew that I refused to allow that to be my story. It's like, I didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know how I was going to get out of it, had no answers still. And so I started just going on an absolute tear. I've found coaches, and I started finding help and finding resources and the tools and the training to begin restoring some order and some health into my life. I mean, there's no way I had a good energy about me. I mean, I might have looked super fit back then, but mentally, emotionally, just wasn't. And it was either my family's going to have to deal with this man that just can't get it together, or I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to take responsibility for where I'm at, and just rebuild myself.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I began to heal, and I began to do work, and God started working on my heart and on my mind, and brought the right people into my world. And some of the people I cannot even explain how they got there, but it was like, God, this is the perfect person that I need right now to help me start seeing the value that was in me and the worth that was in me, regardless of how I was doing in business, and that my family needed me, and that my wife needed a healthy husband to come home, and that his children needed a healthy father to show up and be present for them. And I look back on it now, and it's like, God, why would I even share this? Because there's a big piece of me that's like, God, I could just tuck that away in a closet and just be ashamed of it. It's like, there may be another man out there who is feeling the same thing.
Absolutely.
And if I can share in a way that helps someone not find their way into the darkness that I was experiencing, man.
That's what it's all about, man. We interrupt this episode to talk about Synthesis Tutor, the world's first superhuman math tutor. It is warm, patient, and understanding, and adapts to your child so you never have to worry about them falling behind when it comes to math. In episode 84, we spoke to Chrisman Frank, the CEO of Synthesis, and immediately afterwards, I purchased Synthesis Tutor for my daughter, and it has been an absolute game changer for us. Math used to be a very painful experience. It was frustrating, and there was lots of tears for my daughter when it came to learning math. It's something she's not naturally good at, and we struggled a lot. Now she happily uses Synthesis Tutor every single week, and there's no more frustrating nights. The way it works is that it leverages AI to adapt the experience to your child to not simply master memorization of math facts, but it actually teaches the principles and concepts so that your child can independently solve problems without needing tons of outside help. Because it tailors the experience to your child, it is always adapting and learning where the child is in terms of their development, and it keeps them in the proximal zone of learning so that your child is being challenged but not getting frustrated or defeated by the experience. I am very pleased with our experience on Synthesis Tutor. My daughter's grades have improved in math. It's something that I can now outsource. I don't have to take the time myself to sit there and try and memorize facts with her. She gets excited to do it, and it's fun and engaging for her to learn instead of this frustrating experience, and it doesn't feel like a chore any longer. So we at the Present Fathers podcast highly endorse Synthesis Tutor. There is also a Teams function for those with multiple kids or maybe multiple families want to pool their children together. You can check that out on the website. You can get 10% off with your purchase by going to synthesis.com/PFP. That's synthesis.com/PFP. Go there, check it out, and start supercharging your child's learning experience with the power of AI. Back to the episode.
Yeah. And, failures teach us everything in life. And even if we feel like a failure, sometimes it's also what kind of pulls us through when we start to realize that we can continuously overcome those failures and start to grow from them. But you mentioned mentors and things like that. Is there like a specific book or maybe a movie or an interview or even a mentor that jumped into your life that kind of spun your head a little and turned you around by chance?
It's kind of like turning a ship, right? You don't just turn on a dime like you would a jet ski. So I feel like I would coach with one person that would start the turn, and then I would kind of get to the end of them, and then I would move on to the next. And so I actually worked with the first gentleman I worked with, I found through the Tony Robbins coaching group, and worked with him for a while. And then I found another coach and worked with him for a couple of years, and then got to a point where it's like, I feel like we're, like this relationship's kind of at its spot. And then another guy showed up, and then another coach showed up. And then before long, I look back and I'm like, wow, I've got this string of people, all who have brought something unique that I needed at the time, and that have helped me to grow tremendously. And I look back on it like running the business today is no less stressful than it was then. The difference is I've built the capacity within myself to actually be able to handle that and show back up at my home at night and be a great, present, loving father and husband who, my kids are excited when they hear the garage door going up. They're not running from it thinking, what version of dad's going to come home,
Right.
Yeah.
At any point in time, did you adjust your expectations? Because, they say that the distance between your expectations and the reality of things is usually misery. And so, you have to bring those in a little bit closer. So I'm just wondering if you did adjust it. And I'd also like to know if these kind of things were eroding into your family life, because I know that they've affected me. Like when something was waiting on me enough, it started affecting, like my wife would start to see it, my kids would start to see it. And then, I'd have to do something to alleviate it. Right. So like my example was I had to take a couple of weeks off of work and take a break to prevent, a meltdown basically, or a breakdown. So I'm just curious if you had to do anything like that.
To ask it about the first question of adjusting expectations, I think I'm a standard over high achiever kind of a mindset, and so I didn't adjust my expectations so much as I feel like I have learned. My wife would say to me, "Yeah, I wish you could feel the joy that I feel." And at that time, I was just so, so in the midst of my stuff that I couldn't feel that, I didn't understand that. And now it's like, oh, I see what joy is. I can have a super stressful day at the store, and I can deal with a bunch of stuff that's not fun in the office, and I can still go home and just melt into my family, and they can feel me show up and love them. But those things aren't, they don't teach us that in school. We go to college, we get a degree, even our, first job or two, like they don't train men to understand how do you deal with this pressure. And then how do you also shift gears and still be a great husband, father? I think it's easy to show up and kill it in the office, and then show up and just also fire blast your family when you get home. That's not the image of the man I want to be. And I never, and that's the thing, like I wasn't taking it out on them directly, like wasn't abusive to my family. That's why the only answer I had was, well, I can abuse myself. Right. Like that's okay, because in my mind, I'm worthless and don't measure up to anything anyway. So that, that's acceptable. But it absolutely impacted, my relationship with my family. I mean, my wife couldn't feel the love that she needed. And I mean, we've always had a good marriage, but she wasn't getting the best of me during those years. She was,
I mean, if you don't love yourself, how are you going to like pour over to her,
Yeah. Yeah. And man, self-hate is just, it is a vicious thing. And I think that there's probably quite a few men that look in the mirror every day and they hate themselves, but maybe don't even know it. 'Cause I didn't even realize what it was at that time. Right. I didn't have answers to anything. I didn't have someone pouring some truth into my life beyond, well, just be happy or just, shrug it off. And it's like, well, it's not that easy. So.
Yeah, when you're in that mindset, to go back to the mentorship thing, it's really hard to like trust and kind of accept what other people's opinions are going to be. And I'm sure one of those gentlemen, you were probably like, oh man, this clown right here. But then they really maybe surprised you, or was there maybe like a piece of advice, or because I know you said it's a slow turn, but there's always that one thing that somebody says or kind of sticks out to you. You know what I'm talking about? That may like really just kind of stick with you and change your perspective on things. Is there any piece of advice or anything like that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the second gentleman, his name is Nick Long, and I started coaching with him, and I think he's the first person that really helped me to see the value in myself. Um, and I think he helped me appreciate how much pressure, because you know, I think that in my mind it was like, well, I'm under a normal amount of pressure, and something just must be wrong with me because I'm not figuring out how to deal with it and how to handle all this. And he's been a super successful guy, opened up a bunch of companies that employed hundreds of people. And I was talking to him one day, and he's like, I used to think, man, I wish my dad just had a business that he gave to me and I could come in and just run it. And he's like, then I met you. And he's like, that blew all of those thoughts out of the water. It's like, there's no way I'd run a family business after talking to you. And so I think that it just helped me to appreciate like this is a tremendous amount of pressure. I'm
Yeah,
proud of myself now that it's like, I didn't choose to continue going down that road. I did not choose to, be abusive with my family
definitely.
or to just drink it away. Um, and, and so just the ability to begin to see value in myself, because I had some narratives that were on repeat in my mind that I was just worthless, didn't matter,
Yeah.
didn't add up to anything. And when that's just playing 24/7, you can't get it out of your head, then
Right.
it can be pretty destructive.
When so did those narratives did like something happen to you, or does someone like put those in your mind, or you kind of just crafted them yourself?
I think it was crafting myself. It was,
Okay.
take probably, and some of that, I had one coach that we did a bunch of IFS therapy type stuff. And it's just, a lot of deep work going back to childhood types things. And just these moments where I had assigned a particular meaning or story around different things that just had to be undone. And so I've always been pretty hard on myself. And then I think that just got carried forward, and I was put in a position where that was those stories were allowed to take root. And because I had responsibility, and because I had these roles of being a husband and father and a business leader, well, no, you can't just shove those things down and
Yeah.
compartmentalize them anymore. They start spilling over.
Hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to clarify that just because, you seem like a very capable guy, right? Like you had a pretty good upbringing, good father. You had a lot of things going for you, right? Married the beautiful girl that you met halfway around the world. Had a lot of the good things going in your life, and yet you still had these things hit you, right? And that's the
Right.
point. I want to make that point to guys out there listening to this is like it can happen to anyone, man. Like no one's that good. We can all have this spiral happen very quickly, especially if our inner monologue, the words we say to ourselves, are damaging. And
Hmm.
most of us are very hard on our own selves for whatever reason. And like you said, you created these false narratives for yourself, and it started just eating you up from the inside out. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it time and time again, and I was one of those guys. And it's just completely self-destructive, right? But
Yeah.
so you had coaches that kind of got you out of it, but did you also get like some other men kind of in similar seasons of life, or that you could connect with outside of just your coaches that you were working with?
You know,
Did you start building a little bit of a brotherhood there? And it
yeah,
sounded like you didn't really have that initially.
the you bring up such a good point, and that was actually kind of in my mind as you were talking before you said it. If I had had a band of brothers, if I had had a group of men around me at the time, I I can almost promise you there's no way I would have gotten that far off track. But I fell into this space, and I guess a lot of men could resonate with this too. Fell into the space of, I'm putting everything into business and my family, and I let everything else slide. Right. And so I quit investing into friendships. There's, and that's something that I've been restoring and getting back, because I just recognize how critical that is. But man, if I had had a group of men, even 2 or 3 men that I could have felt comfortable sharing where I was at the time, there there is no way I would have fallen so far. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the really dangerous things that men find themselves facing these days, is just the isolation and separating from other men. And then you get stuck in your head and you don't have another man to pull you out of it. And coaches are great, but we shouldn't all have to go hire a bunch of people and do the amount of work I had to do to get out of how far down I dug myself.
Yeah. So I was hoping you were going to say that. I agree that is the antidote to it. And I think of all the problems we have facing men today, I do think isolation is number one. I think it is hands down the biggest killer of men, because it's essentially the gateway that opens to all the other things, right? You're isolated. Now you go start drinking. You're isolated. Now you start doing drugs. You're isolated. You turn to these things, right? You turn to suicidal tendencies. I mean, it escalates quick. And to your point too, like, I am a professional coach now, right? I'm coaching men.
Right.
I can only do so much. Like, part of how I coach men is to foster friendships with other men around them. Cause like, I'm going to give you principles and teach you things and help you through your specific situations. But those guys that are around you left and right all the time, locally, that's where the power comes in, because they're with you all the time. You can check in with them. You unpack this stuff. You can just put your load down for a little bit, and for a lot of us, we just need to take a breath. Right. And that's
Right.
what's provided through that type of brotherhood.
And I
So
think,
thanks for sharing that.
of course, and it seems to me that the thing that probably keeps most men from having that is just this fear of sharing that piece of them that is dark. But I think that's what connects us the most. The most profound conversations I've had with other men have not been us all listing off our wins and victories. It's the things we struggle with or have failed in or are regretful about. It's being honest with where you're at. And I was on a trip with some men not too long ago, and went fishing and hunting and just hanging out. And one of the men in the group kind of started a conversation. He said, let's all share like one thing going into the year that you're either, excited about or struggling with. And he started off and shared what he was struggling with. And then I went next and shared what I was struggling with. And what was interesting, there were 8 or 10 of us in that group. Not one person went down his list. Not one man went down his list of what he was winning in. He went down what he went and told the team or the group, what he was struggling with. And what I noticed about that is none of those men were looking for another man to take their problem away, solve it for them, or anything. They just needed someone else who could listen, hold some space, and for everyone in that group to know that we're all facing different challenges, but we're not alone in facing those struggles. And when you're not alone, then man, you've got so much more courage and strength to face whatever it is you've got in front of you. And so, for anyone listening, I think, it can be challenging. How do I start a group, right? I think it's as simple as inviting one man to coffee.
Yep.
And saying, man, I'm really struggling with something, and you have to have the courage to step into this. But if you'll just say, man, can I get your advice or your guidance or your opinion? There's something I'm really struggling with. If he gets up and leaves or doesn't want to hear it, okay, he's just not the right man you should be with. But if you've invited him, there's most likely he's going to listen and he's going to hold some space, and very likely he's going to share what he's struggling with too, because he's got something that he's struggling with, whether he shares that or not.
And real quick, I just want to speak to that fear that a lot of guys probably have. And Brandon, I think you had something, so I'll kick it over to you in just a sec. But that fear that a lot of guys probably have, like, oh, well, he's going to judge me or whatever. But it's actually the opposite. Like, it feels good to have another dude call you up and be like, hey, bro, I really need your help with something. Because then it inherently means that you're a valuable person to them. You know what I mean? And like, we want to feel powerful and able to help others as a man, right? And so I think 9 times out of 10, even if you're not like the best of friends or you're kind of just acquaintances anyway, and you're like, hey, look, dude, I know we're just kind of getting to know each other, but like, you seem like someone I can connect with really well, and I'm really struggling right now. I was hoping I could talk a little bit about it. He's probably going to feel like, dude, awesome. Like, he thinks I'm a great dude, like that can help him. That's probably going to be the reaction more often than not. So don't like your example, Franklin, you built these false narratives for yourself, right? This is another false narrative that, oh, well, this guy will reject me, or he's going to think I'm weird or something. That's all up here, man, because he's probably got the exact same struggles. And when you break the ice, he's like, oh, thank God I can talk now too, you know? So I found that to be the case almost always. I've rarely had any experience where someone's like, no, not for me, you know? So just want to dispel that myth that's probably out there. Brandon,
Yeah.
over to you.
I think the other half of that, though, is a lot of men just don't know where to start in building friendships when they've been isolated for so long. So, Franklin, maybe you can start with like just a couple of ideas or ways that you started to implement, finding guys that you could trust, that you could put into your life. Like a great example for me is I went into a small group at my local church, and that's how I found a group of men, and then I grew from that, and then I also started fostering friendships outside of that. So what were some of the ways that you did that personally?
So, uh, I was getting invited to go do things. You know, when you've isolated yourself or just kind of shut things off, it can be whether it's scary or intimidating. The pull can be to just stay there, right? And so it may be that you're actually getting invited to go do things, but still saying no, believing that you're too busy or you shouldn't take the time away from the family or you've got too much going on at the office. But it may be that the most loving thing you could do is actually get around some good, solid men so that you can show up as a better husband and father and leader in your community. And so if people are inviting you, first and foremost, just start saying yes instead of saying no. Like I've gone on 2 really awesome trips this year because I finally started saying yes instead of like going, oh no, I'm too busy or I got to be at the office or whatever the case. Um, the other thing is just looking at all the circles around you. One of the things that, so I got invited on this trip with this group of men. I've started reaching out to them one at a time and saying, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Hey, let's go grab go grab lunch or something. And then when we meet, we talk, but I try to be very intentional about sharing something that is going to be, you know, that's going to open me up and just be real. You know, it's not just talking about sports or work or, hey, how are you doing? Good. How are you doing? Good. No, it's like what is really truly going on in your life. And if you're committed to this and really want to build a friendship with another man, just share something that you're struggling with, and that will begin to connect you. I have one thing I'm doing is building a group of men that have sons that either my son is a friend of, who I admire, that like I admire the young man that my son is a friend with, or I I admire the father of the son, right? And so how can I build a group of men that I can be connected with that are also in a way connected with my son? Or if I look at my daughter and her friends, okay, who are the fathers of her friends that I can connect with? You could build a community group within your church. You could, there get around, get into some environments that have good, where people are showing up with good intentions. You probably shouldn't go look for this man in the bar,
Right.
or at a local sports club or something like. But get into some good stuff. If you maybe you volunteer somewhere, right? Maybe you're on a board, or maybe you're involved in a group of people who are doing some good. Like find a man that you kind of connect with, and then it's super simple. Just invite them to lunch or coffee, and then intentionally share one thing. I mean, choose how deep you go, but just be real with them, because I think men are starving for this. Well, I mean, I look at how many men like just instantly can like resonate when I share something, and they lean in and it's like, well, tell me more. What's going on? How can I pray for you? How can I support you? Like, is there anything I can do? Like, men, I think, are so desperate for this. They want it so bad, and they're willing and want to come around other men that they can also help and support and be a resource to. And you never know. It's like, it's that first one who goes that it's kind of that icebreaker. And as soon as the first person goes, well, then the second one, it's easier for them. And then the third, it's even easier.
Yeah.
So
I say lead with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that it snowballs, and those are some great tips. I appreciate that. So one of the things that helped me get out of my rut when I was in it was I developed a growth mindset. Like I just had this insatiable appetite to grow 1% or more every single day. So the daily growth thing was really important to me. How important is a growth mindset to you, like changing every day?
You can't get out of a dark spot or a rough patch if you don't have that, because otherwise you're just stuck. And you know, if you don't have that, you've also kind of got a victim mentality. You're just unlucky, or you just, the world just dealt you a bad hand. And I know things happen, but at the same time, like, no matter what's happened to us, we still have to take responsibility as men for everything in our world, good, bad, and ugly, right?
Right.
And so, for me, a ton of what this was, it was the coaches, yes, but it was also the tools and the training in starting to do work every day. So, I wake up every morning. I've got a very specific morning routine that I go through every single day. It's like I spend time with God. I'm spending time in the Bible, and I'm doing box breathing, and it's like I
Yeah.
learned so many things from all these different people. A long list of which all of us probably know. And it's like, oh, I'm going to take that thing and that thing and that thing and that thing, and I'm just going to add it all together. And have found what works and what helps me to just show up on point and ready to go for the day, so that my family gets the best of me. I'm still able to pour into the business all I need to. And then when I show back up at home at night, they still get the best of me. But I think those daily habits are a big part of developing that growth mindset, and simply believing that where you are today is not where you're doomed to stay forever.
That's it, man. You nailed it with the whole stuck part, because change is painful, but nothing is more painful than staying stuck somewhere you don't belong, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere that hurts even more. So yeah, I agree with that 100%. I know Justin wanted to say something, so I'll pass over to him. But
No, it's all good. So we talked about intentions and failures, and what we do as men and as fathers is we fail to be intentional, which causes our failures. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the monotony of life, and just busy schedules and all the things that we have going on. And I wanted to challenge a lot of the dads to ask themselves this question. But where do you think, as a father, you're failing right now, and what advice would you give to yourself or to others to remedy that?
you know I think it's easy to look at the big things and go, oh man, I'm not doing some big massive thing. But I think a lot of times it comes down to the small things that we do every single day. Like, I get to drive my kids to school every day. Well, that's 10-15 minutes, right? That I get to use intentionally, or I get to just waste it away. And so I try to be very intentional with that time. Or, am I tucking them in and giving them a hug and praying with them at night? Like, I think so often, we set standards for ourselves that are impossible, instead of going, what if I just started really simple and small? I think for us, one of the things I'm very intentional about is we have dinner around the table as much as we can. We don't have any
Good.
screens on. I try to leave my phone, and I'm not perfect at that. I mean, if anything, it's like, get the phone away and out more. Even though I try to be really intentional about that, but that's probably one that we could all do. Um,
Stuff.
Man, I'll just share this.
Super hard.
Uh, the thing that I have done, so I did all this work for all these years and got so far, but there's one thing that I've done that has had more of an impact on my life than anything else. Let's see here, Easter of 2023, I woke up that morning and I said to myself, I am done drinking. I had been, I had, I didn't have a drinking problem the way most people would think about it. I would have one or two drinks on a Friday with my wife on date night, then maybe cooking out or hanging out on Saturday. I'd have one or two more. I'm talking one or two beers. No one would call that a drinking problem. On Sunday, I am burning down with anxiety. absolutely
Mm.
just disconnected, to the point my wife so many times would say, do you just not like being around us on Sundays because you're here, you're home all day, but you're not connected? And
Mm.
it was just, alcohol did not work with my body's chemistry. Like whatever it is, like I wouldn't even be drunk, like, but the next day I've just
Yeah.
got this anxiousness. So I woke up that morning, and I know everybody's kind of done that. I woke up and said, never again. And then the next night you're drinking. But so today is 404 days since I made that decision. And I have never been, I have been more present, more playful, funny to my wife. Like my wife laughs at the things that I say more than she ever has. My kids feel a connection and a safety and a security around me unlike any other time in their life. I wouldn't be on this podcast, and mine would not exist if I had not stopped drinking. Like,
Mm.
period. Like, it's just been this one thing that, like, it's been tough, because part of me is like, yeah, it's still, there's a piece of me that still would love to go out with my wife on date night and have a drink. But I know that the consequences and the price that I have to pay for that is too great.
Yeah.
And the man that I get to be now, because I just removed that thing that was holding me back. So that seems like a big thing, but at the same time, it was so small, but yet was having such a massive impact for me. And so I don't know if that resonates or not, but getting alcohol out of my life, man, that it's pretty nice not ever waking up with a hangover again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Or
yeah,
just
I know
feeling bad, like not
Brandon's gone
sleeping well.
years without it, and I went 90 days this year without it, and I just hardly ever now. And even now, if I have like one beer, I feel terrible the next day, and I'm like, "What
Yeah.
the heck, man?"
Yeah.
You don't realize how much it takes from you until you cut it out.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
the-
my kids now just see it,
it's
and
the
I don't,
people.
and I want, I'm not bashing it. I really don't have any problem with it. I don't like the idea of it being a good or bad, right or wrong thing,
Mhm.
as much as I like to ask the question, okay, who do you want to be as a man, as a husband and father? What's the vision of who you want to be? And does it serve you to be that man?
Right.
You know, and most of the time it's probably not going to be helping you become the man that your family really deserves. So
Right.
I think that's just a better question than, is this good, bad, right, wrong?
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Definitely.
it sets a good example too. Like I know for me, the reason I quit was because my brother was an alcoholic. He started to recover, and he would come to family environments where my parents and other people would still be drinking, and so they were enabling the stumbling for him. And for me, I told Jordan, I sat him down, I said, "Brother," I said, "as long as you don't drink, I won't ever touch it again." And so I quit the day he quit. And, I've been off of it for what, 4.5 years now. And I never want to go back on it. Once I felt the life, like you said, with it not there, it's like, I don't want to go back. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with it, but it can help some other people stumble if they have addictive personality. So
Yep.
it is
Yeah.
good to be conscious about who you do it around too.
Yep.
Yep.
Guess
That's
I'm
a
the
great
bad
point,
brother.
Franklin. I want to transition a little. So the world needs men. That's your podcast.
Yes.
Talk to us about. Couldn't agree more with the title. I absolutely love it. By the way, we should have thought of that. No, Franklin, tell us about that. And then in your mind, kind of what are the top things that men need to start being or start becoming to really help the world?
Yeah, man. It's funny. The whole world needs men came to me. I was doing a Bible app devotional, and I think it was based on a book called "The Men We Need." And I just had this, like, I just wrote down in my journals, like, the world needs men. And then I Googled, or I looked up a podcast, and I just looked up a podcast for the world needs men. It's like, let's see if that exists. And the first podcast that came up was an interview of the guy that wrote the devotional that I read. I was like, well, there's my sign, right? And so I just had this thing on my heart, but it sat there and kind of just kind of sat there for quite a while. Um, I feel like I've gone through um, a pretty dark space and come out the other side, like and have a life with my family that back then I couldn't have even painted right now. And and it's not like, oh, because I'm making so much more money, or I'm dry. Like, it's like, no, because the connection that's there, right, and the peace that I feel, and in the gratitude and appreciation I have for myself. And so, on one hand, the idea behind the podcast is just to share some real stuff that I've gone through, in hopes that it can help at least one other man that hears each of those podcasts. If I can help one guy shift his life by 1 degree, that could change the whole trajectory of his life. And so I feel like if God has brought me along this path to where I am now, for me to just bottle it up and not share any of it is a waste. And I think that one of the things I wrote down one day was the most dangerous pain that men have is the pain they hide. And until men like step out there, and you can call it being vulnerable, you can call it being honest and just real with each other, that, hey, we're all dealing with and struggling with something. Like, until we have more men doing that, then everyone's going to all the men are just going to keep just shoving it down, suppressing it, sedating it, taking it out on people, and we're not going to get anywhere. But when you look at all the statistics, and you look at the fatherless home, and you look at disconnected marriages, and boys being raised in the world where they don't even know like how to be a man or what that means, and questions around all of that. Like, I just want to be, and you, one of y'all mentioned salt and light before we got going. Like, we just need more men to step in and be light in the world. There's plenty of darkness out there. Like, there's too much darkness. And so, like, there is such a drop in the bucket in terms of, or drop in the ocean, I should say, in terms of like the number of men actually speaking up and taking a stand for like what is good and right and true. And a lot of men that need to hear it. And so it's evolving as a project, and as a mission of mine. But at the end of the day, if a man shows up and is a better husband and father because he listened to one episode and heard one thing I said that connected, then that's the point of it.
Man, we are aligned in purpose. That was literally the exact same thing we said when we started this. So I'm glad that you're out there making it happen. You reference vulnerability. I almost think we need a separate word, because I think there's like two types of vulnerability, right? So there's like, I'm vulnerable, like, oh, I'm exposed, my enemy can hit my flank now. But there's a different type of vulnerability. I think that's why we have this negative association with it.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's a force multiplier. So in the military, we talk about force multipliers as something where it's like, it's this one thing and it makes everything more effective.
Mm-hmm.
That's what vulnerability is within Brotherhood. And so when guys actually open up, it is a force multiplier for the connection and for the strength that you gain. And it's not the vulnerability of I'm exposed to attack, because you're not. You're surrounded by brothers. You're in a place where there is protection and respect and understanding. And so when you're vulnerable in those situations, it breaks the ice for others to share, and it's a force multiplier for everything that you do. And so we almost need to like think of some other word, because it's not really being vulnerable in the sense of like you're weak. It's the exact opposite. It's strength. And you gain strength from others by default when that happens.
Yeah, it's almost like it causes more argument when you throw that word out. And I've intentionally not thrown it out during this because I didn't want it to like throw anyone off. But like you look in the world of what's being pushed out for men. You've got, on one hand, you have apathy, right? Let's just abandon our call to be men on one side, and on the other, you've got the abusive man who just takes all of his God-given authority and strength that should be used to serve and be a blessing to others, and he just takes advantage of it, right? So apathy on one, and abandonment and taking advantage of his authority and of his power on the other. But I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? And I almost think that, another way of looking at it is just humility. I mean, we have to set aside our ego, which is a lot of what separates us too, is, hey, I'm just going to put on this front that says I'm a perfect man that has it all figured out and has it all right. And I've got all the biggest toys and bank account and all this stuff. And it's like, well, okay, all that can go away, but like, show me someone who is humble, and not in a weak way, but in a way where they've got this deep level of strength that they're willing to expose their truth in hopes that it connects them and bring and adds strength to somebody else.
Yeah.
But you're right. Another word needs to be thought of, because there's too much around that like I think we get caught up in, rather than like the real meaning behind what it's supposed to be.
It's really, I'm going to quote Frankie Rousseau, who was on our show, and he said, living a life without pretense. And that's really what it is, right? You're putting down the act, like you said, right? The facade goes away. So again, it's not vulnerability. It's actually just, Brandon, you talked about it the other night, right? The Japanese levels.
Yeah, Matsu no Kai, which is like you have three faces that you wear. One is one that you wear in the public, and then there's one that you wear around your family, and there's one that you only wear around yourself, which is the true, authentic person that you really are. And the Japanese very much believe in that concept, and it's a pretty incredible thing. But I would say my word or two words for this vulnerability is courageous transparency, because you're learning to be courageously transparent with your emotions and your feelings, and you're allowing somebody to sit in the mud with you, feel it, work through it, and then heal and move on stronger. Right? It's like, George is in the military, and he can tell you that anybody he's ever sat in the mud with in war is his brother. And so that's why it's called a brotherhood, because you're sitting through the crap with the other people, and you're struggling, and that struggle brings bondness. And so, I think it's courageous transparency.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm really glad I kicked it over to Brandon to bail me out of that one, because that was pretty.
Eat your heart out, Jordan.
Courageous transparency. I think that's going to go in the vernacular for sure. All right, let's close out with some of our classic fatherhood questions, Franklin. I'll start the first one, and then let the Wonder Twins here kind of wrap it up. But one we ask all the time is legacy, right? I think it's obviously very important. As men, we need to be thinking about the legacy we are going to leave behind. So, in Franklin's words, what is legacy to you, and what are you trying to, when you're dead and gone, what do you want yours to be?
I hope my children can look at my marriage and go, God, I want that. I hope I can have a marriage with my wife that is so passionate and loving and connected that it makes just a mark on my kids' hearts, and that's what they search for and long for and look for and work towards. And I hope that I can be a man that my son can look at and go, that was a good example, and that my daughter can look at and go, maybe I can find one of those guys one day. I want to impact some men. I want there to be men out there who I will never know, who were a little bit better off because I was willing to step out and share. And then I also, we didn't get into it, but I've got a big heart for kids and sending kids to camp and stuff. And so I want lives to be changed, and I want, my wife and kids for their lives to be impacted. But then I'd love for a bunch of people who I will never know to have been impacted by something I did.
I love that, man.
That's so good. So let's go back to Franklin Swann right before he had kids. What is one piece of advice that you now know from the teachings of profoundness from your children that you would have told your younger self?
I think I recognize right now how important that band of brothers was, and how I would have been a better father if I would have stayed connected to other men through that whole journey in a much more intentional way. And so to that pre-father self, I would say, hey, don't let go of your your friendships because you have kids, because you're going to need those friendships to help strengthen and guide and be there for you when things are tough.
It's good, man. I think I would have said the same thing to myself. And guys, it really is that simple. Just have one or two good guy friends. It helps a lot.
I love when you watch like National Geographic, you notice the lions like pick one out of the herd and isolate it, and then they kill it. I think that's a good metaphor for what happens to men.
Yep. All right, Justin, take us home.
Yeah, so one of the questions we ask everybody is there like a core memory or just experience or something that you're not going to forget until the day you die that you've had with your kids since you've been a dad?
It's tough to choose.
Yeah, it's really tough to choose. We go on so many like daddy-daughter dates and father-son. I've taken each of my kids one at a time camping at this park up in Arkansas, and just the two of us. And those were just magic, getting to do that one-on-one with my daughter, one-on-one with my son. Those were magic.
And they'll never forget those.
No. Yeah. We've got pictures and did all kinds of fun stuff, but I could list 100, but that was pretty cool. Getting in the car, like for any fathers listening, like be intentional, plan a weekend away with just your son, just your daughter. If you got more than one son or daughter, like just you and one of them, like at least once a year, take off just the two of you. It will be some of the best time you ever spend.
That's good, man. It's a good reminder. I need to do that more myself. So love that one. Franklin, where is the best place for people to find you? Support the podcast, all that.
Of course, appreciate it. So it is The World Needs Men is the podcast, and I am on Instagram at The World Needs Men. So pretty simple, just those two places.
Awesome. Franklin, any closing thoughts you want to leave? Anything we didn't cover you want to impart upon the audience?
Just Brandon and George and Justin, thank you all for having me on. Thank you for the work you're doing and just being that light and that salt in the world, having conversations like this. And just thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you for yours as
right
well.
Back at you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, dads, with that, let's get climbing the mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.